Welcome to Brighter Rays. The study for this week has been called It Is Not in Me, and we've been looking at Genesis 41, 1 through 37. Today we're going to look at 17 through 37, and this section I called The Thing Fixed by God. That's what Joseph says. So let's take a look at that. First, the Pharaoh's story. Without further ado, after he tells the dream, Pharaoh launches into telling his dreams. He doesn't really talk to Joseph. We don't have record of like any kind of, chit chat or asking him where he's come from or who is he. He just says, okay, here's my dreams. Now, there isn't much difference between the two accounts in the text here. Except the second one, when Pharaoh is explaining the dreams to Joseph, he adds some commentary. So the first one is just a record of the dream. And the second one is Pharaoh's retelling of what happened with a few little comments in there about what he saw. So he says that he had never seen such ugly cows in all of Egypt. And after they had eaten the plump cows, they were still ugly. So the sight of the evil cows and the bad corn left an obvious impression upon the man. He couldn't get it out of his mind. It was so disturbing and so weighty upon him that he had to have, what this has to mean something. I need to know what it means. That's what he felt. So at the end of the story, Pharaoh mentions again that his magicians failed him. So it's not good for these guys. We remember what happens with in Babylon when magicians couldn't figure out what the dreams meant. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to kill them all. So it's probably not a good idea to be a wise man, a magician, to one of these kings, one of these ancient kings, and not be able to do your job. Whatever the cupbearer and the baker did threw them in jail. So I can imagine what might happen to these guys as well. So, but they failed him, and he's hoping that Joseph won't fail him. Now the question comes up: why two dreams? Why are there two dreams here? In verses 25 through 32, Joseph gives the meaning of the two dreams. So first, the two dreams are foretelling the same future events. Joseph says that the reason why there are two dreams instead of one is that the thing is fixed by God and God will shortly bring it about. So the repetition shows the importance, the certainty, the closeness of the events to come. So this should remind us of Joseph's own dreams that he had that were two different visions but had the same meaning, right? Often skeptics will read scripture and see the repetitions as errors or a repackaging of a story, but we're reminded here that God often brings repetitions about to secure in our minds that, first of all, He is sovereign, and second of all, that the events that occur are not accidental. They're not just happening by accident or there's a coincidence because these things are similar. No. These are planned by the infinite mind of God. Okay, and He's using this to teach us. God knows that we need repetition in order to learn something. And so He uses repetition often throughout Scripture, often in history, bringing about very similar events, things that are closely related, things that are that mirror each other, so that we learn, hey, you know what? This is not just happening by accidents, coincidence, or whatever else you want to call it, by chance. This has been planned by mind. Somebody's ordering this. And that should drive us to the one true God. Oftentimes people just attribute it to coincidence or accident or something like that. That's how we get out of that feeling that there's something going on here. There's something behind this. So we kind of just attribute, that was a coincidence. By chance, these things are very similar or almost exactly the same. So, but we know from Scripture that's not the case. There's a mind working. There's a plan, right? There's purpose. So God gave Pharaoh two dreams so that the thing would be secured in the mind. There's no doubt about it. And which we already seen has already driven Pharaoh to figure out what these dreams mean. He didn't just let it go. He needs to know. So it worked, right? And it works on us too, because we see, okay, there's a reason why there's repetition. There's a reason when you get to the law, there's repetition. There's Leviticus, and then there's Deuteronomy. There's repetition there. We know why that is. So let's look at the meaning of the dreams. So the meaning of the dreams is fairly simple. There will be 7 years of abundance throughout the land of Egypt, but then there will be 7 years of famine. Now the famine will be so great that the 7 years of abundance will be forgotten. You wouldn't even be able to tell that the good years even happened. That's how bad the famine will be. And so God has graciously given the Pharaoh a warning as to what the next 14 years will bring. He's given him a 14-year, heads up on what's going to happen. That's a long time to know what's going to be going on. So the question is, what will Pharaoh do with this important information? What's okay? You got 14 years or 7 years of good, 7 years of bad. What's going to happen? Will he heed the warning, or will he just enjoy the 7 good years and then, hope he makes it through the 7 bad years? I don't know. Or he could just be like, yeah, I'm out of here. Or maybe he's, who knows what he's thinking. So, what's to be done? You got the warning. Now you got to act on the warning, right? There's no use of hearing warnings unless you're going to do something about it. So Joseph doesn't pause. He doesn't just give the interpretation of the dreams. He doesn't stop there, but he also gives his advice as to what Pharaoh needs to do in response to the dreams. So he doesn't just stop there with the interpretation. He moves right into, okay, here's now what you need to do. So first, Pharaoh needs to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee everything that's going to happen in these 14 years. So, which is interesting, because you think, well, maybe Pharaoh could do that. But Pharaoh's relying upon magicians and his counselors, right? And so he already is doing that, so he knows that he needs to do that. And so Joseph suggests you need to find a guy who's wise and discerning and put him over everything that's going to happen here. Someone needs to be over this. Someone needs to take care of this. You need to appoint that person. Then that person needs to appoint, or the Pharaoh needs to appoint overseers throughout the land to take as tribute 1/5 of the produce in the 7 plentiful years. So he says you need to go through and you take 1/5. Now, if he was already exacting a tribute, a tax on the people, which is probably the case, who knows what exactly it was set at. Just like in the law of God, a lot of times it was 1/10. So you'd give it 1/10 as a tax. It was easy to measure out, easy to figure out. And so a lot of times it would be 1/10, but if you bump it up to 1/5, now you're talking a lot more. And so he says, okay, now you need to say, okay, all the abundance, there's a 1/5 tax on that. So in the plentiful years, you're going to get 1/5 of all the plenty. Then they're to gather up the food and store it and then distribute it to the people when the famine hits, thereby saving the land of Egypt. So it's a good plan, right? When you have the good times rolling here, you're going to gather up a lot of the excess that's there, and then you're going to store it. And we'll see in the next section how great that abundance was. I mean, it was out of control. And so the people are going to have a lot of food during the abundance. They're going to be able to store up their own stuff. 1/5 of it is going to be given to the Pharaoh so that would be stored up. So there's going to be food all over the place during the time of abundance. But think about this. Here we are. Joseph has made it all the way through this. He's standing before the Pharaoh. And now he's standing here awaiting the answer. What's going through Joseph's mind? We can only imagine. Well, that's the end of the story right there, and we'll pick up the next part next week and see what happens to Joseph. What is the Pharaoh's response? What is he going to say? What's going to happen? Cliffhanger. Of course, you can read the next part of the Bible, and hopefully you already know the story. But you think about it. Put yourself in Joseph's place. I mean, he was just pulled out of a prison. He had to shave and clean and change his clothes. And now he's standing before the Pharaoh, who has the power to kill him or to restore him or to do more for him. And he has no idea what's happening. but he's trusting in the Lord still. And he's saying, God, if this is going to happen, God's got to do it. So we'll see next time what happens there. So come back tomorrow, and we will look at the conclusion, kind of apply this to our lives. What can we learn from this passage? And then we'll wrap up the study. So come back next time.